So, okay, there it goes. Great. Thank you all so much. Okay, so we're going to get started. I am so excited to see so many of you here. And for those of you I haven't met in person, my name is Teacher Alyssa. My last name is Young. And I'm really looking forward to this school year. We have a lot to get through in fourth grade. I think your students, if they've told you anything about me, it's that I like to get a lot done and have a lot of fun while doing it. I hope that that's the experience that they've been chatting about at home. I can tell you we're already well into our first writing project. These kiddos have already worked on the different strategies for all of the different multiplication facts up to 12. We are like hitting the ground running. So I am excited to have them with us in school each day. It's been such a blessing to be able to be in person with all of the students this year. It's been really great to have that kind of community in the same cohort, a little bit different than last year where we had students online and in person. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about me before we get started. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Hopefully that works out for a second. I'll reshare that once we're ready for our presentation. But a little bit about me. I grew up in Westchester, Pennsylvania. I went to a small school that I think is very similar to Frankfurt Friends School in size. So in some ways, I have an experience that your students are going through. And I went, after that, I went to a larger school for high school and middle school. But I've been in Quaker education since I was a child. I wasn't raised Quaker, but me and my mother joined a Quaker meeting. Westchester Friends meeting is my home meeting. So I think I'm one of the few Quaker teachers here at Frankfurt Friends, if not the only teacher. There are some administrators who are Quakers, but I joined the Quaker meeting when I was in third grade. And so I'm a big proponent of Quaker education. I see a huge amount of benefits to it. Just in terms of the kind of philosophy that follows Quakerism and how that aligns with the classroom. Going off to college, I went to Bryn Mawr College. And in Bryn Mawr College, I double majored in psychology and education, two of my passions that have been lifelong passions. Before that, I was a camp counselor. I've worked with kids. I've taught Sunday school for Quaker meetings. I've done a lot, and it's always been around kids because I just jive with them. I think they're just the best. So after college, or during college, I guess I student taught in third grade, but the majority of my experience has been with fourth grade. This is my 7th year teaching. Did I get that correct? Yes, my 7th year teaching, and I've taught fourth grade for all 7 of those years before my student teaching experience in third grade. They are my bread and butter. I love fourth graders. They are just like the best age, in my opinion. I think you guys are in the perfect spot if you guys have a fourth grader. They're just awesome. So, and I'll tell you a little bit during my presentation about fourth graders, their developmental stage. I think it really helps to think about where they are in terms of their development in order to help guide how we interact with fourth graders. And I taught in New York City right out of college. I taught at a friend's school there. I also taught in an all-girls school, and that was for 3 years. And then I moved to Philadelphia, and I've just been at Frankfurt Friends ever since. I love it. It's a great area. It's a really great school to be a part of. I love the size, and I love what we're capable of doing at a small school like this and connecting with kids in such a big way. I currently live with my partner, Anne Marie. Anne Marie does the communications and marketing for Frankfurt Friends School, so you may get the raft from her. And me and my partner live in Germantown. We have a cat and a dog, and life's pretty good. We're renovating our kitchen right now. So that's a little bit about me now, I think. And I don't know whether this is true, but Catherine, our head of school, has been telling us that you guys are dying to see the space. I know that unfortunately, not being able to welcome you back in and having you sit at your child's desk it's hurting my soul too. I wish you all could be here with me. But in the meantime, I'll give you a tour, show you the space, and hopefully it'll give you at least a glimpse into what it looks like here. Now I have to pause to get my meeting controls because it's not, okay, well, that's what it is. Okay. So coming into the space, I'm just going to try and show you with my hand. Let me know if you can't hear me or if something looks a little wonky. This is our whiteboard, our projector. My fourth graders already know these are our volume levels so that we can practice how to be in different spaces and for what different types of learning activities. We have a giant, large rug as well as some space there that we also fill so that we can be as spaced as possible when we are learning together on the rug. But it's really a great situation to be this phase in the COVID-19 pandemic where we can sit on the rug together. We can have table groups together. I really appreciate that. I'm just going to take a tour of a few different little things. This is some of our reading work we've done so far. We have We the Readers of fourth grade, our reading workshop constitution. The kids have mentioned that we should sign it, and we haven't yet, but we will. We also are working on our first reading unit about voracious readers and understanding what makes a lifelong reader. And we've got some different activities that have gone with the lessons in hand. We've got that they think critically about who they are as a reader. They choose books and keep track of their reading. I'll show you a little bit more of that. This is our student supply center. It's got everything that they could possibly need, thanks to all of the supplies you guys brought in order to have a great year of learning. This is just put up this afternoon. We've got our Hopes and Dreams display. I'll explain that project a little bit more. I'm going to spin you around. That's the entrance to the classroom. We're really fortunate because we're one of the few classrooms with a sink in it. It's nice to be able to wash our hands frequently. We've got our table groups. It's nice to not be in rows this year, like I said. So it's great to see these kiddos are working on keeping their desks nice and neat. Whew, I can't imagine their rooms. Good luck to you all on that. But we're working on keeping the desks nice and neat. Up on top of our shelving here is some of the unit, based on units. We've got different read alouds that I give to the students and some nonfiction books about space for our PBL. We have a really nice nook that's our take a break spot for emotional regulation and calming down when frustrated or when you are feeling sad or any kind of big emotion. Up here, we have some nice twinkle lights as well as some kind of a social justice corner that we're working on. Hopefully, we're going to do some read alouds that then lead to some social justice standards. You might be noticing we've got a lot of maps here. These maps are related to our very first PBL unit, which is Box City. We just started our first lesson today. I'm quite excited about it. They mentioned the improv. We were doing improv, or Teacher Rachel mentioned it at the live stream. We were doing improv to practice saying yes and building off of each other's ideas instead of shutting them down. A great principle for both improv and for collaborative group work in PBL. Some of the big work that we're doing right now is creating a culture of readers. You can see here that this is their currently reading sheet. Students are encouraged to write what book they are currently reading, to share their thoughts about it, to rate the stars. It's a new system, so we're getting used to it, but the great thing is that we can all kind of see what each other is reading, share that, ask each other for recommendations. And bring you to our library, which is gigantic. I have something over 1,000 books in our library. It's organized in two different ways. The first way is that it's organized by author's last name so that they get acclimated to using real library. But we also have it organized by some series, some genre books are lumped together in the other section of our library. We've got like cozy chairs and bean bags so students can be comfortable and read. Another way that we're building a reading culture in our classroom right now is by, our bookshelf display. This is so that we can long-term keep track of the books that we've read over the course of the fourth grade year. We are lucky to share, I don't know whether you can see, and I apologize if it's shaky, but we're lucky to share some space with our lovely chickens. They provide us with much entertainment, including cats that sometimes like to crawl on top of the chicken coop. It's quite a thing. We often talk about it in fourth grade. And then this brings you here to my desk, which is not just my desk, but really a collaborative space. It's got forged stools so that I can meet with small groups as well, or some that students can work at my desk. That takes you on the tour of our space. Also in our building is the third grade and the fifth grade. We are together with third grade and fifth grade for recess and lunch every day. And so we're kind of a cohort of sorts in the Tricky building right next to the Idea Lab. So that takes you on the tour. I am going to take a quick second to start sharing my screen again to show you some slides that'll help me stay organized, but also you. I think it's going to take a second to load. And I'm just going to try and take us through our curriculum a little bit, get you acclimated with some of the big parts of fourth grade, and let me know if something's amiss. Okay, so I like to talk just first about the kind of day of a life of a fourth grader. What does it mean to be a fourth grader at Frankfurt Friends School, and what does it look like? So our typical day, arrival, starting at 7:55, the doors are open. We engage in morning work as a way to settle into the classroom. It's really beneficial to kind of give students a transition moment to acclimate to the new space that they're in. Every morning, we do morning meeting, which is a time for us really to gather as a community to have a time to kind of learn about each other, to play games together, to connect together, but also to have discussions. So recently we've been doing a lot of goal setting as a class during morning meeting. It's one of the ways that we really get a chance to kind of connect as a community right off the bat. I think it leads to a lot of fun and a lot of success in just kind of community facilitation. After a morning meeting, typically we have math, although this schedule is not the exact schedule every single day. This is kind of a typical one. We have math. Students have a 15-minute morning recess. They come back in and they're going to engage in literacy, which includes reader's workshop and writer's workshop, but it can also include writing mechanics, including grammar, vocabulary, and spelling. So it depends on how that time is used, but it's a nice long period. So there's a lot we can fit in there. Although I obviously don't have fourth graders sitting for an hour and 25 minutes because they need to move much more than that. After lunch and recess, we spend 3 days a week in the nest, 2 days a week out in the Blacktop Meeting House area. And then in the afternoon, it really depends on the schedule, but we have project-based learning, specials classes, or instructional time, which can be kind of that catch-all. We do read aloud, we do writing mechanics. It all kind of gets fixed into that instructional time. Starting at 2:45, we kind of clean up, wind down, pack up, get the classroom a little organized before we dismiss at 2:55 to 3:05. If you're on a computer and you want to screenshot it, I think it's a great thing to have reference. Of course, I'll send out these slides, but this is our everyday schedule. So this kind of shows you the day by day. I highlighted the specials for you because I know that it's nice to know what day your kid has gym so that they're wearing sneakers and not some flip-floppy type thing. So we're lucky to have most of our specials in the afternoon, and we have PE on Thursday morning. So mostly it's a pretty good flow to our day. And again, I'll send this out so that you have a copy of it. Like I said, our specials classes are music on Mondays with teacher Sandra. And I wanted to include the emails because if there's something that comes up in music class, it's best to reach out to teacher Sandra with that. Of course, feel free if you feel like it makes sense to CC me on it. We have art on Tuesdays with teacher Lisa. We're lucky to have PE twice a week with teacher Mark and Spanish twice a week with teacher Blythe. I'll make sure that you guys have those emails so you can contact them if there's anything that comes up in those classes specifically. This brings me to my art classroom community. I mentioned it with morning meeting. That's one of the ways in which we facilitate a classroom community, but that's really the kind of heart and soul of the class. But it's also what leads to a class that can have a lot of academic success. So that kind of strong community that knows each other, responds well to each other, has the ability to tackle problems when they arise, leads to the greater academic success, more productive class periods, greater learning, but also it allows us to really do that social emotional learning internally. Responsive classroom is kind of the guiding way that student discipline works. So there's a lot of facets to it, but I don't even know if student discipline is really the best way to phrase it, but I think that that's the most commonly understood word from a parent side. What it looks like is really it's very discussion based, it's student led. When something goes wrong, we find a way to fix it. We don't need to get so stuck in the arguing phase. It's really about emotional processing and then finding a solution to whatever the problem is. benefit of it is that students are not blamed. They're held accountable without feeling a lot of negative emotions that can be tied to discipline. So I really am a big fan of responsive classroom. I find it to be very helpful for me as an educator. It's something I've enjoyed learning about over the years. And I think every year I've become a stronger educator in that way. Hopes and dreams. I hope you got a chance to take a look at it. I'll make sure I send it out at the end so that you guys can kind of take a picture of your own child's. But our hopes and dreams is the way that we kind of, as a class, recognize each other's value, that in this class, we are all working on something and we are all hoping to accomplish great things. Using our hopes and dreams, we'll develop some class rules. Although they can just kind of be thought of as norms. They're the things that we want to have in our community that will allow us to achieve great things. We do a lot of community building and strengthening in fourth grade. I am a big fan, I know you've already heard about them, of team challenges, a way to kind of get students to be discussing, facilitating, working together, thinking in creative ways. And that is something that we revisit all year. It's not just a beginning of the year thing. It's really something that requires like maintenance, just like any type of relationship. As a community, we require maintenance, and we have to either have class meetings and discussions to deal with problems, or we need to kind of bond over a shared success. So that kind of strengthening is really important. A lot of it comes from fourth graders. So they're the ones who will eventually, especially as they develop more independence and grow up, that they start over the course of the year saying, hey, teacher Alyssa, can we have a class meeting about kickball? Suddenly everything's going terribly. The teams are always unfair, this and that. And that's the great, it comes from them. We facilitate a decision-making process and make sure that we're addressing problems. Their independence is really growing as fourth graders. I often notice a huge jump in independence between third grade and fourth grade. I really think there's a lot that goes on social, emotionally, and mentally for fourth graders, where their independence really skyrockets. They want independence, they crave it, and they find ways to seek it out. So I'm always looking for ways to give them more independence. Being flexible can be hard for fourth graders. So I like to say that I have flexible fourth graders, but that it's something that takes a lot of hard work at. So being okay with change, not being resistant to, if something goes wrong, these kinds of things, it's something that they're developing in. And so it's something that's important to keep at the top of our minds. And also a big part of my classroom community is all about positivity. I am a firm believer that and I will tell your students about this at some point, but we all impact each other. And so that kind of culture of positivity is something we can grow. And it's something that is important to have to facilitate and to develop. And when we don't have a culture of positivity, our emotions and success can just plummet. So that's something that's really important to me and typically to fourth graders. Speaking of fourth graders, I want to tell you why I love this age, but also tell you a little bit about this age developmentally. To me, fourth graders are some of the most eager and passionate individuals out there. There's something about this age where they are just suddenly like bursting at the seams, ready to take on the world and do so much. And I love that. That's why I teach fourth grade. It's my favorite part of fourth graders. I think that there's a real confidence boost in themselves academically, that they now feel capable of achieving so much. And that's amazing because now they've got all these tools. They feel confident and ready to use them, and they are ready to just kind of rock and roll and do some amazing things in the world. That eagerness, they're still goofy, and that's for me really important. I just love the goofiness and the playfulness that fourth graders bring. And I think that there's just so much that they are bringing to the table in terms of still knowing and wanting to be themselves. That to me is one of the most important parts of fourth graders, is that they are still unique and wanting to be unique and are finding out and figuring out who they are and really wanting to share that out. And I love that. I'll talk to you a little bit about the development of fourth graders. So I think that most of you right now have somewhere in the 9-year-old range. Many of you have been parents before and are like going to say, yep, I know all this. But I like to look back at this each year because it's a great way for me to think about how in the beginning of fourth grade, I'm not really working with a fourth grader. I'm working with a late, budding fourth grader, but really still somebody who's stuck in that third grade land. So they're still 9. And in some ways, that helps me to adjust how I teach them based on their developmental traits. So this is broken up into physical, language and cognitive, and social emotional. I'm not going to read it all to you, but I'll just point out some of the ones that I think are most critical. I bet you've already experienced this, but those 9-year-olds typically come home really, really tired. It can look like crankiness. It can look like extreme hunger. They push themselves physically to the limits and often are exhausted at the end of the day. They're still very restless. They can't sit for long. That's something that we are really cognizant of and aware of as educators, and make sure that a lot of my classes work in, there's always transition. So we're moving our body, or I'm sure that twice today I've already made them give me 10 jumping jacks or some other physical exercise. So that is really critical. I have with the kind of language and cognitive, they work hard and they definitely are kind of go-getters when it comes to, they want to put in a great amount of effort. And they're paying attention, but you might have already noticed this, but they like to jump around between interests. So one day it's, I want to be an astronaut and go to space. And the next day it's, I want to be an architect and build amazing buildings. So those interests can still really jump around. I notice they're industrious, they're curious, they're ready to build and create and understand the world so that they can do more building and creating. And then I hope that this is one that kind of resonates with you all, but I do think that 9-year-olds carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. The kind of global issues are very emotional and present for them. So that's something to keep in mind. And then social emotionally, they're competitive. It says they may form cliques. I don't see as much here cliques, but I would phrase it as students often gravitate into a small group. That's pretty common at this developmental stage. They can be really critical to themselves and others. So they're quick to say something somewhat negative or somewhat harsh. The phrasing isn't quite down yet sometimes. And to that effect, they really need a lot of encouragement. And then I think this is the one that you'll see maybe sometimes around bedtime, but sometimes it's very common at this age to have anxious feelings. Friendships can be the source of a lot of those anxious feelings. So that's something to be mindful of and to treat seriously, and provide skills and, validation for those feelings, but also skills for what to do when you feel those big feelings. Looking at 10-year-olds, we have a ton of 10-year-olds who are excited about needing outdoor time, playing big physical challenges, huge gross motor movements. Those muscles are still really growing, and really that is helpful for them in a learning, from a learning standpoint as well. With the language and cognitive, they're very peer focused. I don't know if you've noticed this, but this age range, they are super social. They are very focused on peers, peer feedback. They're very cognizant of. It can weigh heavily on them, but they also want to have the validation of peers. This is all really important to them. I think that this one's one that I see a lot in the classroom. You might see if you're playing a board game, but they like rules and logic, and they like when we follow the rules. So breaking rules can feel really hard for them. And I think the biggest one to point out is that they can concentrate on reading or thinking for longer periods of time towards the end of fourth grade, not often when they are right out of third grade. So that's something to keep in mind. Social emotional, I think this is a big one. Quick to anger, quick to forgive. The amount of the kids get over things so fast. It's really amazing. When something is wrong, they can go back to high-fiving and giggling the next minute. It's just amazing how quickly they can recover socially, but also how quickly they can be to become frustrated with a peer. So that's something to keep in mind. I do think that the last one to mention is just that they are hardworking fourth graders. They take pride in their schoolwork. They want to do well. They care about the success, and they want both our validation, but also they want to feel personally proud of themselves. Looking ahead towards our curriculum, apologies while I take a sip of water. Looking ahead towards our curriculum, I'm going to go through each class period. I want to tell you a little bit about some of the big beliefs, some of the units we have, and some of the structure of the classes. For Reader's Workshop, these basic beliefs of that in school they need to be reading because they also need to be reading outside of school. Experts say that an hour of reading between home and school a day for students is really important towards keeping up with that reading level for both academics, but also for the reading for fun and having kind of that lifelong reader mentality. With reading, there are direct and explicit skills that are taught, that reading isn't just something that happens for some kids. It needs to be taught explicitly. I know you know this because you guys are the ones who they beg to buy new books, but they need lots of high quality reading material to work through. They're still really figuring out their genre of choice and who they are as a reader, but that's a big part of it. And then you've probably heard this kind of common adage, but in the younger ages, they are learning to read, and then in the older ages, they are reading to learn. We are in fourth grade really on the shifting of the end to the reading to learn phase, that students are using reading so much more in academic classes, whether that be PBL or whether that be in Writer's Workshop using a mentor's text. They need to be able to use reading material to accomplish anything in other classes. I really like to keep my Reader's Workshop and my Writer's Workshop very goal-based and very feedback-based, so that students have a lot that they know, and they know what they're working towards. It's impossible for us to achieve anything if we're not sure what direction to walk in. Most of our Reader's Workshop are structured with a mini lesson, an independent work time, and then a share. Our big units are, our first one is interpreting characters, the heart of the story. It's all about character development. It ties in with some Writer's Workshop. You'll notice that trend, that our Reader's Workshops units go hand in hand with a Writer's Workshop unit. We do them in conjunction. During that first unit, we read aloud Tiger Rising by Kate DiCamillo, which is an amazing book. I hope they haven't read it yet. It's best when we read it all together. Our next unit is reading history and historical fiction book clubs. This is one of students' favorites. They love it because they get to learn academic texts, reading history nonfiction, but also enjoying historical fiction book clubs with peers. Towards the end of the year, reading, there's some more nonfiction reading, but more with the science lens, and using that in conjunction with our PBL unit of Marsville as well. I'll get to that soon. In Writer's Workshop, the same structure, although we add in conferring time so that student writers are either conferring with a peer or conferring with me. And that happens in Reader's Workshop as well, but it's a bigger part of Writer's Workshop for sure. The basic beliefs that all children can learn to write well when they are explicitly taught how to. Students need to write for real. It should be authentic. They shouldn't be writing based off of just some silly prompt out of a textbook. That really, they should be mimicking what real authors do, writing texts that would actually be useful in the real world. Another one, and this one's hard for fourth grade, sometimes they like to write it and be done with it and then never see it again, but writing is a process with distinct phases, and we need to go through all of them in order to be strong writers. And again, goal-based and feedback-based. With our units, our first one is the arc of the story, which is writing realistic fiction. So going hand in hand with that character development unit in Reader's Workshop, students are going to write realistic fiction, just like they're reading realistic fiction, and they're going to develop their own story. It tends to be a longer one. It's a great unit. They, in fourth grade, it's almost the first year where they start to write those kind of chapter books that are actually chapter books, where they're longer. It's great. Going into Unit 2, we've got Bringing History to Life. This unit has taken different forms in the past, depending on the final project, but it's related to their use of nonfiction history reading and then translating that into a conglomerate text, one that has multiple different kind of sections to it. So one could be a historical fiction diary entry, and the next page could be explaining that historical time period. Another one might be about some famous figures at that time. So it's a text that has a lot of different types of outputs, and it's a great unit. In the end, we also do, in conjunction with Reader's Workshop, we do some literary essay work, as well as, when time permits, we do some personal or persuasive essay writing. Again, writing, this is slightly different though. Writing mechanics, we do 3 different programs. One is spelling, which is the program Words Their Way. I am a huge believer in this. It is based on the idea that spellers are grouped into small groups where they are working with their specific spelling stage. So that not within a class of 4th graders, if I handed them all the same word list, we would not get very far or grow very much as spellers. So the work in spelling is tailored to each group. So I'm going to have one group of 3 students who's got this one list and a different list for every other group. The goal behind this is that students are figuring out the spelling pattern and noticing it themselves. And so they're sorting the words, trying to figure out why are these words spelled in the way that they are, and then applying. The goal is always to transfer to their own independent writing. So if I have already taught about how the E on the end makes it a long I, well, we should see that when we get into their actual writing outside of spelling. With vocabulary, it's multiple exposures in different ways. Strategies for acquiring new vocabulary are taught in conjunction with Reader's Workshop, Writer's Workshop, and our vocabulary text, which is a workbook that we do. And we play lots of vocabulary games. This helps us, our vocabulary increasing helps us with our figurative language use, understanding word relationships, prefixes and suffixes, the differences between multiple meaning words that have multiple meanings. And then in grammar, there's a 3-step lesson that explains and kind of models the different grammatical rules. It's broken up into units. So there's units on nouns, there's units on verbs, and it goes on and so forth. And students are practicing with those grammatical tools in order to hopefully apply it to their own writing. In math, we use the curriculum Math in Focus, which is Singapore math. A lot of you like to call me and tell me about how this is so different than the math you grew up with. It's definitely taught differently, although I promise you it is the same math. It's just communicated slightly differently. I really enjoyed this. It took me a while. I am empathetic. It took me a while to understand this kind of quote unquote new math, but there's a lot of benefits to it. I think it's more conceptual. Students are able to understand why they are executing something. There's kind of that deeper thinking behind different ways to solve problems instead of just there's only one path forward type of thinking. I like to say I'm looking for mastery, not just learning for a test. And I provide retake opportunities the entire year. So I don't necessarily expect a student to do well the first time they take a division test. That's okay. They might need to practice some more, and then we can take it at any time throughout the school year. More on that as we get into our first units. I am a big proponent of math talks and math thinking. I want people to be able to explain how they are doing what they are doing with math, which is to some 4th graders frustrating because sometimes they're just like, I know the answer. Down below, you can see this kind of display. There's going from the pictorial stage, which is the doing stage, actually manipulating, whether that be using money to help them understand division and dealing it out, or whether that be using actual tiles that represent fractions of a whole. To moving into the concrete stage, the use of images, which I think this is where it gets unfamiliar for parents, the use of images, bar modeling, different ways of drawing and showing mathematical work. And then moving finally into the abstract stage, which is more or less how you and I were taught math when we were younger. The abstract stage is symbols. It's using standard algorithms, and it is like executing straight up math. So that kind of pictorial phase and that concrete phase can be a little bit hard for us adults because it's different than how we were taught math, but I promise you we can do it. Some of our units are listed here. We will get through many units throughout the course of the school year. Certain ones, depending on where we are in the school year and depending on kind of like how things are flowing and what I'm noticing about learners, I end up jumping around between the units. I'll always keep you apprised. I know math can be often the subject that parents want to be able to do extra practice with at home if needed. And so I provide all of my unit materials to you on Google Classroom. I will explain once we get into our first unit how you can access those materials. But we will get into decimals and fractions. That's often a lot of hard work, big and new for fourth graders. Those can be some big ones. We do multiplication and division. We'll multiply multiple digit numbers, so like a 2-digit number by a 3-digit number. With division, it's their first year of really doing long division, which is exciting. I love to fit in geometry, and we have a lot of different geometry units to go through. Our first unit, which is what I've just started 2 days ago, is a unit working with whole numbers. It deals with adding, subtracting, and place value knowledge. Our project-based learning is our way of kind of having hands-on learning, science and social studies. It's very design thinking based. It's engineering, kind of engineering focused. And I like to say that it's really student led and teacher facilitated. So every single year I've taught project-based learning, my projects have not been the same. That's because they're really based upon what the students' interests are gravitating towards, what they are wanting to do. And I really believe in this work because it's authentic. We will hopefully meet with real experts in the field of city planning for our first unit, Box City. I've worked in the past with the PCPC, which is the Philadelphia, am I going to get their name right? Their acronym correct? It's the City Planners of Philadelphia. And so having develop that relationship with them allows it to keep our work really authentic. They've been phenomenal at working with us. Students are doing real things in our PBL units. With Box City, we have a unit that's really based on urban sustainability, urban ecosystems, and city planning. So all of those kinds of fields are really worked in there. The immigration unit is our second unit. It's worked in different ways in the past, but with my immigration unit, some of my core beliefs are that students need to understand the immigration, our country's immigration history, but also understanding kind of the immigrant experience and how immigrants are moving through the world worldwide, not just focused on America. Our third unit is Marsville, which is a unit that is designed so students are thinking and grappling with the concept of, if we were given a second chance planet, how would we design our society differently to allow for humans to live in a way that it doesn't harm a planet? So it's really eco-based. It is very design thinking and systems thinking based. So there's, I've had students design compost toilets that would eliminate the need for such waste in our water system and all kinds of things like that, which is it's really amazing to see them do real work like that. The Sustainable Development Goals are connected to this, and you can see our kind of PBL focus on the left that ties all of our units together. And our Sustainable Development Goals that we are using for Box City are number 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, number 15, Life on Land, so thinking about our ecosystem, and number 13, Climate Action. But there's a lot of them that get touched upon through our city planning unit because so many of these, like education, sanitation, good health and well-being, are tied to city planning. I'm almost to the end. Sorry that I'm talking a breakneck speed. We're just going to go over a few logistics before the end. For communicating with me, email is best. I try to be as prompt with my emails as I can be. It's tough to be in the classroom all day teaching. I often will not be able to respond to you during the school day because I am with the students for all but sometimes 15, 45 minutes. So it depends on the day and how my emailing is going, but I promise you I'll get back to you. If you have noticed I have lapsed on an email, I take no offense. I really try to keep on top of my inbox, but feel free to shoot me another email being like, hi, you haven't responded to me. I don't take offense. It's tough for me, but I'll try my best. With email is a great way to schedule a phone call with me. I love to talk on the phone. I think it's a great way for us to communicate quickly about something, and often more effective than a long email chain. In an emergency, a forgotten lunch, dismissal change, call the school. I've listed the number there. You'll get in contact with Miss Tori for things like dismissal or lunch changes, things like that. I have my classroom website. I'm working to keep it updated so that you can see it. But you'll also receive, and I think this is the best way to hear about what we're doing in the classroom, is through our newsletters that come out every other week. I am trying to take as many photos as we can. I just got a GoPro for our classroom, so that'll be exciting. But we have a bunch of different albums, one for each month. You can find those on our classroom website, but I also link it on the newsletter. Homework. This is a big one. I know I haven't formally told your fourth graders this yet, but now that I like to tell you all first, but this is kind of our friendly reminder that students need to be reading at home. That's their main homework. I think it's a lot better than some busy worksheets. I'm excited to see them continue their growth. It really does take this partnership between home and school. I try to provide them with 30 minutes a day, but it's not always possible. So that 30 minutes a night is super important for them and for their continued growth and their continued acceleration through reading levels. I don't do a reading log. I don't find that it holds students actually truly authentically accountable to reading. So instead, I ask you, the parents, the adults in these children's lives, to help them stay accountable to their reading. I, as a child, faked reading for a long time. It was one way that I kind of was sneakily getting away with not doing so much reading. I know it's hard for parents. Let me know if you need resources on how to kind of support your child as a reader. I'm happy to talk about that. One of my favorite articles for that is How to Raise a Reader from the New York Times. It's a phenomenal article that goes through different ages. And I think it just has so many good tips. I've linked it here. You'll be able to get that link once I'm done this presentation. Rarely, but sometimes there's whole class homework. This would be something like needing support in something for Box City. We need to kind of get a video touring of their own home neighborhood, something like that. It's usually one-off. It's very infrequent. And most of the time, homework is assigned on an as-needed basis. So something like, we were a little bit behind in writer's workshop. I'm sending home their draft so that he can finish this up at home or get some more writing done, or math worksheet if one concept is kind of looking like that student isn't quite getting it. So that's more on a individual by individual basis. And then this is a big one. Good news is it's not your responsibility. It's really their responsibility. I am excited for them to keep their independence growing. I like to communicate about homework with them so that they feel like they're taking ownership. If I notice, hey, they're not completing homework that I've sent home, I'll be in contact with you. But really, I want to leave it to the students and me to coordinate so that they feel responsibility for it and take it seriously. And hopefully, so it's one less thing for you all to do. The odds and ends, birthdays in fourth grade. I'm happy to say we can now have birthday treats to celebrate your children's birthdays. They love to bring in something. They don't necessarily need to bring in a treat, but they can with COVID, as long as it's something that we can be eating. I would say reaching into a giant bag of chips would be bad from a COVID standpoint, but a platter of cupcakes, and if you brought in napkins and plates so I could put them on individual plates, that would be okay. If you don't want to bring in a treat, less work for you. I completely understand. The child can elect to have some extra recess in their honor as a birthday treat. So that's birthdays in fourth grade. Water bottles, super important. In the world of COVID-19, it seems that water fountains have ceased to exist. Ours has been shut off. So because of the COVID concern, we have a water bottle filler station. I really need that water bottle in school every day because I don't have something to give your child if they do not bring the water bottle. For sleep, this is super important. I get sleepy fourth graders all the time. I've had kids, despite how energetic and how enthusiastic and how much phenomenal planning I do, I have had a fourth grader fall asleep on me. So keeping an eye on those dark eyes, those dark circles, helping them get that bedtime routine. I appreciate your help in that. masks, I've said it once. I sent an email about it recently, but I'm just noticing that there's some, I think it's mainly the medical masks, the kind of surgical, the standard surgical masks that are just really not well fitted for students. They fall down. They're often adult sizes. I'm noticing a lot of noses out. I'll just reach out to you personally if it is kind of a trend beyond now. I find the KN95 cloth masks to be pretty good. Just make sure that your child has a properly fitted mask in school to keep us all safe and to keep us in school, which is what I really want. Sorry. We have technology, which my last thing to say is that we have Chromebooks. It's working a little differently. It won't come home. It'll only be in school Chromebook use this year. If you haven't yet, please sign the AUT form, the authorized use of technology form. I have a screenshot of how you can do that here. In RenWeb or Fax. I don't know which one they're calling it these days. And if you haven't filled that out, it would be great so that we can have all students on their Chromebooks pretty soon. If your child doesn't have that form filled out, it's just going to make learning in the classroom a little bit more challenging. Please let me know if you're having any trouble with it. I'd love to help. They will have a Chromebook that's assigned to them. It is, if it gets broken or something like that, Teacher Andrew, our tech facilitator, will help us out with it. Usually it's just the fault of the Chromebooks just kind of being a little bit on the older side, not the students' faults, but we like to practice taking care of them. The last thing, odds and ends wise, is textbooks. I send home math textbooks because it's quite boring to try and teach fourth graders from a textbook if we're all just sitting at our desks with our textbook in front of us. Trust me, fourth graders don't learn well that way. So instead, I'm going to send the textbooks home with you. This is great because it's a perfect resource for you to have at home for if extra practice is kind of needed. So I'll be sending those home soon now that I've told you about it. The only thing is that you need to return it at the end of the year in classic school style. Just keep them in one location so they don't get lost. I know fourth grader rooms can be quite messy, so wherever it makes sense to store those textbooks so that you return them at the end of the year so you don't get charged for them. Okay, I did it. I'm done. My voice is hoarse, mainly from talking to your fourth graders all day, but thank you so much for listening to me talk for, I don't know, I think 40 minutes. I hope that that wasn't too long for you or that I didn't bore you. I promise I don't talk to your fourth graders sitting still for 40 minutes like that, but I really appreciate you all hearing that information. Coming up is if you have any questions that you're wondering or thinking about that I didn't mention right now, I'd be happy to hear them by email. And what I'll do is if you think it kind of applies to more than just your family and you think it would be a good question for everybody to hear, send it to me. I'll collect all of the emails. And then what I'll do is I'll kind of send out here were some good questions that I didn't cover at back to school night so that I can kind of provide answers to everybody by email so that you guys, I have time to respond and also collect them. For now, I hope that you all have a great evening. I really appreciate you coming and thank you so much for being here. Feel free to unmute to say goodbye or just leave on your own, whatever works for you. I appreciate your time so much.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Hello, everybody.
Good night.
Bye, Lisa.
Thank you, Rhonda. Bye, Heather. Bye, Hannah.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank
Bye,
you.
Hannah.
Bye, Anna.
Bye.
Bye, Nikaya. Goodbye, Anna. And is that Everett?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just have to say, I didn't know you guys were city cat vets. That's my cat's vet. So now we're going to have to talk about that.
Look how fat my cat is.
Oh, my goodness. He's a cutie. All right, everybody. Have a good evening. Thank you guys so much for coming out.
Bye, Anna. Bye, Teacher
Bye.
Lisa.